doing as the project managers were doing. And so Ryan said, you're not a project manager, you're a senior resource manager. The other odd thing is that each of them had a business card that said each one of them was a bureau chief. And I asked Paul Carlson about this. I said, how can you have 3 bureau chiefs? They don't have bureaus in them. And he said that's just what they want. They're bureau chiefs. So another little red flag there. I think the next week, Doug Whittley called me in and said, okay, you need to move over to this other position with Monica. You need to write a memo to me saying you accept this other position. I did that. I just said I realized the reorganization, and I'm willing to move to this other position. Well, I got a call from Mike Carroll, maybe that day or another day, the next day, and said, you have to change your memo. You need to talk to Jeff Hankman in HR, who was the head of HR at the time. He'll tell you what it says. Jeff Hankman told me I needed to say I voluntarily accept the demotion. And I said, and if I don't? If you don't, you'll be laid off. Now, I realized that about the same time that my name was on my position, my name was on the layoff list that was posted on September 1st. Even though I had not been notified that I was on the layoff list. I got the call from Mike Carroll. You need to talk to Jeff. You need to change your memo. I changed the memo. I gave it to a secretary to take up to Mike Carroll. I waited downstairs. I heard Monica Stone's phone ring. She said, yes, that's right. I asked, the secretary came back down and I said, well, did Mike call Monica? And she said, yes. He was asking her if this was an admiral or a merit covered. And she had told him it was a merit covered position. So something was very odd about that. So I moved over to my other position. I worked there with Monica and her team in the energy bank for a while. I sat in on an interview for a position. We interviewed somebody who I said, I don't think this person's got any qualifications. How did they even get to the interview? And Monica said, well, he's a friend of Doug. So we heard nothing about how the positions were to be filled until about the second week of January 2012, when Monica came to us and said, okay, we're going to fill this position. It's going to this person, the friend of Doug, you could say it at that time. And we're also hiring a contract person who happened to be somebody who had worked with Monica before. I didn't really think anything of it until the next day or so. Monica called me in and said, we will lay you off. So I was kind of ready to go, so it didn't come as a big shock to me. And I packed up, and I was out of there. Filed a grievance. The grievance was denied, curiously, by Tim Cook, an attorney at the Iowa Board of Regents. What somebody from the Iowa Board of Regents had to do with my denial of my grievance, I have no idea. But with my attorney, we filed an appeal, and we went to mediation in February of 2012. As Carol Frank said, we met, the two of us met together with our attorneys, with Mike Carroll, and Ryan Lamb. We came up, we agreed to the terms, nothing in writing at that time. A day or two later, my attorney contacted me and said, we got the settlement agreement, it has a confidentiality clause in it. And between the two of us, we agreed we didn't want that. He contacted Ryan and said we don't want it. Ryan said, what if we pay him additional money for the confidentiality clause? I said no, and I didn't find out how much money they were offering. That was the end. I got my money, so I've moved on. So, how's that? Can that help you?
Dean, would you clarify who was it that asked your attorney if they could offer you money for the confidentiality? Did you say
Ryan Lamb, DAS attorney, told my attorney, Ted Craig, at Dickinson Law, that they would offer me money for a confidentiality clause.
Okay, thank you. I think I'll all four of you for testifying today. I know we already have questions starting, giving us a lot of information, and I'm sure we're not going to get all of our questions answered today. But let's get started, and Senator McCoy.
Well, thank you all for being here. I appreciate your stories, and I wanted to just basically begin, if I could, with you, Tony. Tony, walk us through what happened on September 1, 2011, because I think we need to understand what occurred that day in terms of the entire DAS staff. How many people were impacted on that day?
On September 1st, Senator McCoy, I believe it was 10 staff members, maybe 11 or 12. There were 7 or 8 project managers, Ken Thorpe, Bobby Bailey up in DAS Core. We had a safety engineer, I was a safety officer. So all those individuals were impacted that day.
And you indicated that day that you believe that they were taking out institutional knowledge of more than $150,000 worth of, $150 million worth of projects.
Yeah,
ongoing projects.
Yeah, that's a ballpark number.
Yeah.
But we were right in the middle of the Fort Madison Prison project, the ICIW project. I was cleaning up the IUB project, but my point is those 2 prison projects alone were over $100 million. I know that. And all the others were managing millions and millions worth of other projects. So that's where I come up with that ballpark, 150 million. Could have been 200 million, 120 million, I'm not sure.
So your background is project management, and obviously you had an ongoing project that you were working on.
Correct, several. Yeah, probably 8 to 10. Doing a lot of work at Terrace Hill down here on the complex, yes.
Do you feel that by leaving your desk that day, you were leaving the state in a vulnerable position in light of those projects?
No doubt about it. That's why I cannot believe how they did it.
Right.
I mean, no business is going to do something like that. I mean, that.
Right. I've never heard of anything like that.
No.
Now, in terms of the replacements, you stayed around and you found out that the replacements were across the hall from you.
Correct. Well, we were let go at 8 o'clock in the morning. I stayed around, packed up my stuff. I had to go talk to some constituents in other buildings about my projects, just so they weren't left in the dust, other agencies. And I returned back to my desk around 11, 12 o'clock, and those individuals were in the office at 11 o'clock that day. Same day, 3 hours later.
And was your desk one that they were filling?
They were not sitting at my desk physically. They were in Paul Carlson's office at the time.
And when you were in essence laid off, were you approached at all about a settlement as you pursued your case with the state?
I was never approached about a settlement. I filed my grievance, went through the process. You know, there's a process for merit employment, as you know, in the administrative rules. Filed my grievance. We went to the PERD board, Public Employee Relations Board, and that's where we mediated out. And this was probably, it was over a year. It took over a year to get to the PERD board, and that's where we mediated out the settlement.
Tell me about the salaries of those employees that replaced you in the jobs being higher. How did you learn that, and what did you learn?
I did an open records request shortly after I got laid off, because I knew these employees replaced us. So I wanted their background information, what they were being paid, and all that good stuff. So Brian Lamb forwarded me that information. They were being paid at the MAC. They were classified as executive officer 3s, and their pay range was such that I think at the time it was $91,500. They all came in at $91,500 the first day they stepped foot on the job. I have that information at home. I can forward it to you if you'd like.
That would be helpful. And if I could, I'd like to move to Ken. Ken, I've reviewed your credentials. I know your background. I know your supervisory level. I know that you have enormous credentials. With respect to the employment process, the posting of jobs and the posting of positions and the formation of a reorganization. Did the state EAS agency, arguably our HR arm of our state government, did it follow its own policies?
No.
And how did they violate those policies?
Well, for me, for example, you have a list of what I think the violations are. And also when they had to replace me, obviously, because there's just a lot of stuff that I did. So when they replaced me, they actually did an open bid, and they had actually a contractor replace part of my functions. That contractor was Baker Mechanical, who happens to be a friend of Doug's.
And what were they paid to replace you?
As I understand, it's $200,000 a year. And then also you still had Steve Gross, who was replacing me at about 85 or 90. I don't know exactly what Steve's.
And Steve was a security supervisor, principal?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And in terms of the reorganization and providing notification to you via the notification process required by rules, were those rules followed?
No, sir.
Okay. Dean, my last question is for you. Why didn't you take the money?
I wanted to tell my story. I didn't want to worry about any kind of a confidentiality agreement. I knew something was going on. I wasn't sure of it. I had rumors. I actually started a relationship tree, and I mean, it's 3 pages long where I can point to who knows whom and how did they get the job. So I wanted to get the story out.
And in terms of your mediation process, how do you feel your mediation process was handled?
Well, I've never gone through a mediation before, but I thought it was okay. I mean, we pretty much just sat around the table, and the mediator went back and forth between my group, me and my attorney, Ted Craig and Jeff Krausman, and the mediator would then go to talk to the other side and go back and forth, and we finally settled. I think we started at 9, we finally settled at about 2. We agreed on a dollar amount. We shook hands, we went home. The mediation agreement, or the settlement agreement, came to me by way of my attorney a few days later.
And that's where you first learned about the money for your silence.
Yes, the mediation, or the settlement agreement that came to my attorney from Ryan Lamb included a confidentiality clause. My attorney said, we didn't talk about this, we didn't agree to this. Ryan Lamb said, well, what if we paid Dean some additional money for it? And I said no. So I don't know how much they were talking about.
They never got to a figure.
No.
Okay. And Dean, do you know, with respect to the reorganization, how many new employees were hired and how many of those employees had connectivity to Woodley?
Well, what I know 3 senior resource managers. I think one of them was connected to Wiggly. I think 2 of them were connected to Ryan Lamb. One of those people subsequently left. He was replaced, I believe, with somebody who had a relationship with one of the 3 senior resource managers.
And Dean, because of your position, it was reported on Monday in the Des Moines Register, March 31st, by the CFO for DAS, the Iowa Department of Administrative Services. She sat in meetings where merit-based employees, workers, are legally protected from political discrimination, and they were being identified as Republicans or Democrats. Were you aware of those meetings?
No, I was not.
And had you ever heard that before?
No. Well, I mean, I'm an acquaintance of the former CFO, so she may have mentioned it, but we never got into any specific conversations about it. So I don't know who was saying it or when the meetings took place.
Dean, did you believe your layoff was a result of your political affiliation or your political involvement?
I don't know so much as my political involvement personally as my involvement with the Democratic administration and an administration that was promoting things like a project labor agreement.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Dean, could you, were you working at Department of Administrative Services at the time of the lawsuit with the state of Iowa, Fort Madison?
Yes.
Can you tell me the attorneys that were working against the state on that lawsuit?
John Templer, and I don't remember the name of the firm.
For those of you that lost your job on September 1st, could you walk the committee through the materials that were provided to you when you were laid off? Did you receive any documentation, layoff documentation? If so, whose names were on your layoff document? Like, I'd like to know who all knew about the layoffs occurring at DAS.
I didn't bring that document with me, but I know it went to the governor's office, you know, so it's the standard layoff plan form. I think it's 2 pages. So I want to say Mike Carroll, Jeff Point, Doug Woodley. I'm not 100% sure. There are 4 names on there, and I can't tell you for sure, but it's a standard form. Do you remember?
I believe Paul Carlson was on it too, as the administrator for most of the project. I'm sorry. Paul Carlson was also on the list because he was the administrator for almost all of the engineers, project managers. Tony worked for Dean.
Mine was signed by Director Carroll. It was given to me personally by Doug Woodley. According to protocol, it should have went to the governor's office. However, I have no idea where it went after I left.
Senator Garrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dean, I've listened to your statement and I've looked through the appeal that you have filed, dated May 4. And I know you mentioned your involvement with project labor agreements. Apparently that was part of your job. Could you tell us a little more what your duties were in connection with project labor agreements that you mentioned in your appeal?
I was involved in some of the initial meetings to establish the project labor agreement. I helped the project manager of these projects insert or assemble the project labor agreements as part of the contract. And I was involved a little bit in some of the monitoring of the project labor agreements, particularly the Iowa Veterans Home, with the project manager in our office worked directly with, I think, a union leader who was monitoring the work, monitoring the project labor agreement. So I was involved in some of that. I was not heavily involved. I was peripherally involved.
All right, and as you say in your appeal here, Governor Branstad changed policies in regard to the project labor agreements, is that correct?
Yes.
And you bring that up in your appeal here. I gather you think that might have had some role in your being laid off, is that correct?
Let's just say I'm connecting the dots, and that seemed to be a piece that might be involved in the process. I don't have any proof.
All right. And you mentioned that there were 12 people that were laid off on September 1, 2011, is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
All right.